Hello, hello, and happy Thursday. Yes, it's Thursday. I got it right. It's already the month of February. Welcome to AFO Radio. I'm Mag, and this is AFO Live. Now, all I got to say is January couldn't have passed any faster. If you grew up in the 90s, you would have remembered that little cookie tagline that says, now you see it, now you don't. I kind of feel like January was exactly like that. Some of us, started 2021 on a very positive note, hoping for it to be so much better than it was last year. But, a lot of us also started the year feeling very down and dejected due to a lot of reasons, okay? And it has been a pretty tough year for many out there. So today we're going to be talking about being hopeful, right? Since it's the new year, most of the time we make new resolutions. But this year, we want to talk about being hopeful in the new year and during a pandemic, which is an absolute tough time. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, I've brought in the expert as usual, because he's the best person to go to when you want to talk about topics like this. So let me bring on my guest this afternoon. He's none other than John Kam. He is the CEO of the Jungle People. Hey, John, how are you doing?
I'm good. Hello, Meg. It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has. It seems like it was so long ago, but yeah, it's always nice to have you back on the show.
My pleasure. Always good to be back.
So we were chatting earlier, and it seems like, it's just another repeat of last year, isn't it? Although it's a new year, we're down to the second month. So how do you feel about how fast time is just passing us by?
You know what? It's been a really strange time, and that's been what what I've been saying for the last couple of months, right? Everybody's been staying at home, then we went out for a little while. Now we're back in home. And if you're Malaysian, end of the year last year, everybody was like, woohoo, chuti chuti Malaysia, right? Let's go here, let's go there. We've been stuck for such a long time. And this new year resolutions came in. Everybody was talking about 2020, write it off, forget about it. Let's look forward to 2021. And then 2021 came. And man,
2 weeks later, we're down back at home, aren't we?
later, right? And the numbers are like, yeah, I'm going to give you 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. So it's a really strange time. And I think based on that alone, I can totally understand why a lot of people would at one time or another be feeling a little bit depressed, a little bit dejected, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Pretty normal a reaction to the current situation, I think. But so in those situations, for some of us, or for if you're listening to this, hopefully you're in the same position as last year and not worse off. In which case, if you're in the same position and not worse off, then I would just say, hey, count your blessings.
Absolutely. I was going to say the same thing too.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. When you were saying, we'll give you 2,000, we'll give you 3,000, we'll give you 5,000. I just wish that was the number in my bank account right now. Unfortunately, it's a scary number that we should all be very afraid of because we're dealing with something we really don't know much about, other than what they give us. But it's proving to be stronger and more powerful than anybody can even comprehend, isn't it?
Yes, and
No.
yeah, I suppose it's going to be a more of a yes than a no. But this morning was interesting because I was reading an article that said over in India that they had tested a
Higher
large,
immunity.
and they found that there was antibodies in I think about 50 over 60% of the population already.
Correct.
And it didn't go as bad and as crazy as people expected for it to be in India. It was bad, but it wasn't as bad as people expected. So hope is always there. Right?
Yes. That's a nice way to slide that in, John. I didn't see that, but that's interesting. Okay, so now we both mentioned this. Some may have started the year on a very positive note, but some may have, felt dejected and felt really hopeless as they started the new year because of many other reasons. You know, you may have lost a loved one, you may have lost your job, you may have even had to endure a really massive pay cut, right? So with all this and the fact that, you know, we're also afraid to go outside because we don't know what's going to happen when we do step out of our homes, it's kind of difficult to stay hopeful, you know. So where do we begin?
Well, I'd like to think that after when we reach the maybe quarter two or quarter three of the year, we're sort of kind of settled into the rhythm. And I
Hmm.
think right now it's particularly tough to be hopeful because of the hopefulness that we had going into the end of 2020, right?
Correct.
And looking back, I think a lot of people, and to a certain extent, even myself, it's just been sort of programmed into us that when the year end comes, it's a time for closure and a time for new beginnings
Hmm.
and hope. And that's sort of been embedded into how it's always been.
That's right.
So, in terms of realistic expectations, I don't think we were very realistic in terms of our expectations. And I think one of the key things of remaining hopeful is to assess your expectations. Some of our expectations, looking back, why would we expect, January, February 2021 to be any better than December 2020? It's just not logical. But yet, because it's a very emotional thing, we did
Hmm.
feel that way, right? We did feel that it can't get any worse. Come on, we've
Yeah.
been through the worst. Kita jaga kita. We're okay. We got it down. We beat it. We flattened the curve and so on and so forth. And you'll find that this time around the curve is this high, right?
Yes.
The messages that are coming out these days is not so much the messages that were coming out in March last year. So
Yeah.
March last year, there was a lot of positive messages going around.
That's right.
Take care of ourselves, go, 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 frontliners, everybody stay safe. There was a lot of these messages going around.
Yes.
This time around, and this is just my gut feel, I don't have a scientific basis for this, gut feel and observations. I just feel that people are like, bleh, whatever, don't care lah, and people are saying, just open it up and let's go out. Now, I'm not here to discuss whether what is the right thing to do and what's not. I think there are wiser people out there who can, discuss that
That's going to
aspect
be a never ending argument, though, if we open the topic right now.
the sides of the argument. But I think right now, with regards to the question that you've got, how do you stay hopeful when you're going through such bad times? Jobs are being cut left, right, and center. I've
Hmm.
I've got so many of my contacts who started cooking and baking as a means of livelihood, which is really really cool. And I'm
Yeah.
going to cover that later on, right? But if you ask me, I was talking to a CEO friend of mine, and Rohit, if you're listening, this is for you. And he said, it's time for us to adopt and not adapt. And I found that to be a really interesting way to frame what a mindset needed to be. Because
Hmm.
we've always talked about adapting. We always say that people can adapt really, really fast.
Correct.
But in a situation like this, it's not just about adapting, it's about adopting. Now, I then took that adapt versus adopt and I said, look, we can't just adopt and you can't throw out adapt because that's what it's always been.
Mm.
But when I try to make sense of it, I think it's about adopting a certain mindset. Adopting the mindset that, that whole new normal thing. I
Hmm.
don't think people have actually adopted the mentality that this is it. This is how it's going to be. We are adapting the mentality that says this is how it is for now.
Mm.
And therefore, our behaviors have adapted for now. But when it
Correct.
turns out to be longer than for now, you say, what's going on?
Yeah.
And I know this is fuzzy and soft, but adopting the mentality that this is it, and we're not going to get out of this, and this is how it's going to be, is probably the first step towards accepting the new reality, accepting reality. So, and this is the first step in moving away from surviving to thriving. And I spoke about this the last time that we came. Because right now,
Yep.
here's the reality: we're still in a pandemic, But
Yep.
we can't view it as a crisis anymore. We're no longer in crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Because a crisis, it can't be a crisis after a year, 2 years, 10 years, 15 years. We're still in crisis. No,
Yeah.
the crisis happens at that time, and after that, it becomes the normal. If it continues on the way it's going, it becomes the norm. And
Correct.
if the mentality is still in crisis mode, then you can't grow, you can't prosper, you can't thrive. Okay, so get this through to your heads. You're no longer in crisis. The situation is no longer a crisis situation. If you were Robinson Crusoe and you were abandoned on a desert island, the first 3 weeks would be a crisis. I'll give you the first 3 months. That would probably be a crisis. After a year, 2 years, it's no longer a crisis. And if you're still alive after a year, 2 years on that deserted island, you're probably growing and you're probably doing pretty well compared to where you were before, right?
Correct.
But if the mentality after a year is still, I'm in crisis, guess what? You're going to be doing the same thing that you were doing the first 3 weeks that you were on a desert island. And that's what's happening right now. So time to get out of the mentality that we are in crisis. We're no longer in crisis. We're just here now.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the situation is now, we got to learn to deal with it, right? So if you're not in crisis, then there are only 2 other modes that you can be in. You're going to be in growth mode, in which case you're looking at the situation and saying, hey, how can I do better? Or you're in thrive mode. It says, what are the opportunities here that I can take advantage of that's going to help me prosper?
Mm-hmm.
And adopting this mentality is really important. So that's the first thing I'd like to say. And for all of those, and you mentioned earlier, lost jobs, pay cuts, etc., etc., etc. How do I remain hopeful in this situation? Well,
Yeah, it's easier said than done, isn't it? I mean, if a person's going through that at this moment, they're like, yeah, you guys can talk about it, but you're not enduring it, So it's kind of a tricky situation.
Well, and you're right. It's always easier said than done. But I'm a small business owner, and I'm still running a business that was based on face-to-face interactions, right? Classroom settings, workshops, gatherings, trainings, all of which was banned for the last 12 months, or a huge part of the last 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
So from that perspective, am I experiencing it? Hell yeah, I'm experiencing it, right? But here's what I've also realized. There are 2 things that I recommend during times like this. No, take a step back. So under those 2 things, there's one main umbrella. I've just got one word. When you're feeling depressed. Now, if you're in depression, that's a different story.
Correct.
Okay? If you're in depression, that's a different story. I'm not going to touch that because I'm not an expert there. But if you're feeling depressed, that's a different story. So if you're feeling depressed and you don't feel hopeful, you know what? It's okay.
Yeah.
Nobody feels hopeful all the time.
That's
I
true.
would be really, really concerned if you were chirpy and happy and hopeful all the time. Nobody feels hopeful all the time. You can feel hopeless. You're allowed to feel hopeless sometimes. But you also have to understand that just because you feel hopeless doesn't mean that there isn't hope. Just because you feel hopeless doesn't mean that there isn't hope. Hope is always there. As long as there's life, there's hope. Right? And because there's life, there's hope, you feel hopeless is probably not true. It's probably not a true reflection of what's going on out there.
Mm-hmm.
So very few situations, for my personal philosophy, like I said, is as long as there's life, there's hope. So there is hope. You just don't feel like it. And on the days where you don't feel like it, I've got one word for you. It's called discipline. And discipline is about doing things that you are supposed to do, even when you don't feel like it.
Yep.
Doing things that you have decided that you know is good for you, that you know you ought to do, is going to bring you good results. You don't feel like it, it's okay. You don't have to like it, just do it.
Okay.
And on that basis, right, it's about, if I've lost my job, what should you be doing right now? Now, most people are going to be feeling pretty angry, pretty upset, pretty disappointed. Use that anger, use that disappointment, channel it to things that are productive, things that you should be doing. So you don't have a job right now, doesn't mean that you can't go look for a job.
Yep.
And if you're looking for a job, doesn't mean that you can't send out 100 resumes. Doesn't resume to 100 companies. Doesn't mean that you can't, go and approach um, 50 companies every day. It doesn't mean that you can't do that. Do you feel like doing that? No. So some of us, we send out 10, we send out 15, we send out 20, and then we get depressed because nobody's answering.
Correct.
Yeah, but nobody's obligated to answer you. Your job is to keep doing that on a daily basis. If you can send out 20, 30 on a daily basis, you know what? Somebody's going to answer you sooner or later.
Yeah. One's
And,
bound to respond.
well, you're going to get results sooner or later. In this case, maybe later than sooner. But guess what? You want to be doing things that's going to
Mm.
increase the chances of those results, instead of wallowing in that anger, instead of wallowing in that despair, which is by far the more tempting thing to do.
Yeah.
Looking at it and saying, what to do, virus, what to do, economy, what to do, government, and that's the way easier thing to do, right? Wallowing in that despair, and we get angry,
Yes, we
bloody,
do.
and and so on and so forth. We get angry. I'm saying channel that anger, and say, you think you're gonna get me down? You're not gonna get me down. I'm gonna send out 50 resumes today. I'm gonna call 20 people today. I'm gonna keep doing that. I'm gonna, and so on and so forth. You channel that anger, and basically, whatever you think is bringing you down, you look that thing or that person in the face and say, no, you're not gonna win. I'm more stubborn than you. I'm not going to let you win. So channel that energy, channel that anger. The second thing that you can do is you want to get into the mentality of failing fast. And failing fast here means that you want to make sure that you get your expectations right, and you're not probably going to succeed in the earlier parts, whether it's finding a job or whether it's an alternative source of income, whatever it is, or picking up a new skill, you're probably not going to succeed fast.
Yeah.
And that's going to be in your mind. But you want to go out and do things and try things really, really quickly and fail really, really quickly so that you can learn really, really quickly and come back and rejig it. So if you're not getting responses after your first, 20 letters to organizations, you want to look back and say, okay, what have I learned? This format isn't probably the best format. Maybe I should change the format. But you've learned it really, really quickly. Come back, change it, go do it again. So do learn, change, do it again. Do learn, change, do it again. And you know what? This is not going to be something that you want to do. Very few people actually want to do this. And
Yeah.
like I said, you don't have to like it. You just have to do it. So this,
Absolutely.
on the days where hopeless, where you feel hopeless, you fall back on the discipline. Do the things that you're supposed to do. So, yeah, and as long as there's life,
That's hope. So you said two, right? One is discipline. What's the other?
fail fast.
Fail fast. Okay.
Fail fast. Channel the anger. Fail fast.
Okay.
And you gotta also, for me, be aware that, again, that whole cycle of failing fast is in place because you are failing in order to learn. The objective of failure is to learn, and that's when failure is okay. Where
Yeah.
you're going to say, I'm probably not going to succeed, but I'm going to try it anyway just to see what happens. And then from there, I'll know better where to go. Now you're in a good space, right? Because then mentally you know that, it's probably not going to work out, but it's all right because I'm going to learn something from it. And that's going to propel me one step further. Now, this is a realistic state of mind. But if you put all your eggs in one basket, metaphorically speaking, in a mentality, and say, this is it, if I don't get this done, this is the final straw. It's never the final straw. And you don't go for the final straw mentally. You don't tell yourself that this is the final straw. And you got to be very aware when you're starting to tell yourself messages like that you check yourself really quickly.
Okay. That's interesting. I have to admit that I do that all the time. It's like, okay, this is last. I'm not going to do it again if I fail this time. So that's actually really good advice. And I think for some, failing is not an option. You don't give yourself or you don't allow yourself to fail because for you, failing may just be the end of it. So, how do we change our mindset to tell ourselves that it's okay to fail, but we've got to learn from our failures?
Well, that's the first thing you got to do is to reset your your frame of mind about failure. Failure is not bad, like I said. Failure is actually a pretty good thing because failure helps you learn. So if you in your plan have a set time frame or a set period where you are going to fail, and I
Mm,
know I set this aside for me to fail so that I can learn, then it becomes part of a larger plan.
okay.
So you get what I mean? So you've got a plan, and part of that plan includes time for failure.
Okay. So it's a conscious effort in a way. So you've already given yourself a leeway to fail, but to make sure that you pick up from there.
Now, so that's the period. It's not just giving yourself leeway to fail. It's about saying, I want to fail, and it's okay to
I
fail,
want
and
to
it's
fail.
good to fail, because by failing, I find out what's wrong with the plan.
Okay.
Because nobody has a perfect plan. It's impossible. Right now, one of the things that I'm teaching in class is relentless course correction, which means you're basically on your guard and you sort of maneuver. You know those games where you maneuver, showing our age, right? And you avoid all those meteors that come
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
maneuver your way around. That's what it is right now. So whatever plan that you've got, you keep it as a general outline and a general framework, but don't expect to stay there. Don't expect to be able to follow it 100%. So you've got to be able to course correct as you go along. Now, the only way you can course correct it as you go along is by identifying what's happening, what's wrong with the plan, and what's changing in the environment, and then modifying accordingly. And
Mm,
that mentality has to be in place.
yeah.
That mentality is not in place, and you're expecting success. And guess what? You're probably not going to get it immediately. You're going to fail, and when the crash comes, you crash really really hard. So plan for a period of failure. Plan for a period of failure that you can learn from. Ask yourself, what is it that I need to learn? What is it that I need to know? And how can I get that knowledge through the failures that I am going to have, rather than if I fail, because it,
Yeah.
pretty much inevitable, I guess.
Correct. Okay, that's very interesting. So, if you're watching, welcome to AFO Radio. This is AFO Live, and we're talking about being hopeful in a difficult time at in this afternoon. And if you have a question, you are more than welcome to actually drop your questions in the comment section below. Now, John, speaking about failure, now a lot of people lost their jobs or lost employment in the past 10, 11 months, correct? So to them that may seem like a failure. They hit the wall basically, and that was not part of the plan. So when you come to that juncture and you've hit the wall and you feel like you feel lost at that point, it's really hard to pick yourself up. What do you do then?
Um, okay, so allow yourself some time to be grumpy, I guess. um, but it's really important. I've got this term that we made up, or I made up in the to sort of describe the situation that we've been in the last 12 months. The biggest challenge about the situation that we're in terms of isolation and work from home and lockdowns and so on is isolation. And as I think about it as an individual, and an individual is made up of the messages or influenced by the messages that are around the person. And we
Yeah.
don't necessarily realize what those messages are, but because we are surrounded by those messages, it sort of seeps in, right? So I call it information osmosis. It sort of just seeps in, uh,
Yep.
like osmosis. Um, and because we're now in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that that marinade of messages is lacking balance.
Yep.
We're still surrounded by messages, right? We're still pieces of meat marinating inside. Apologies to the vegans and the vegetarians. Um, but you might have some salt left,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what you're marinating in. But because you're not mixing around with your colleagues or your friends, or your best buddies, your BFFs, and your relatives, and so on, you're missing that part of the mixture into that marinade. So you got to be very careful right now. What's in your environment? What are the messages that you're marinating in right
Mm-hmm.
now? And a large part of that marinade is actually made up of the messages that you tell yourself. Right? So if I'm a negative person by nature, if I'm a pessimistic person by nature, I could be telling myself, what I was too lousy, I wasn't good enough, situations so bad,
Yep.
horrible, I'm never gonna, and so on and so forth. That's the message that I'm sort of marinating myself in.
Mm.
And you know what? That's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because I would go on Facebook, and all these social media, they've got the algorithms that show you what you want and what you feel like, right? So I'm gonna look for news that says, yeah, that's depressing. Yeah, that's depressing. And then social media sort of recognize, oh, he's looking for that. You're looking for that. Okay, I'll give you more of that, right? And I end up not just telling myself that bad news, I'm also getting bombarded by the bad news unconsciously.
That's like law of attraction, isn't it? The negativity would
Yeah,
attract
so
negativity.
you speak about the law of attraction. It's just an algorithm.
Yeah.
They actually successfully managed to turn it into an algorithm, which is quite impressive. But so one, be aware. What are the messages that you are marinating yourself in? What are the messages that other people are throwing at your environment, and therefore
Mm.
allowing you to marinate in that environment? And then you choose the kind of environment that you want to marinate yourself in. The messages that you want to have seep through. And in that sense, be careful of all the social interactions that you may have, whether it's online or offline, virtual, face to face, and so on and so forth. You just got to be aware. Ask yourself: are you surrounding yourself with the kind of messages that you need?
Mm.
Now, it doesn't mean that you want to surround yourself with people who are chirpy and happy and totally supportive all the time. Because I also think, from a leadership perspective, that this is the time for tough love. We don't want to go and, oh, Maggie, poor thing, yeah, it's such a difficult time. And whether you're a leader in your family or your relationship or at work, doesn't matter. The time for that poor thing message is past. Now is
Okay.
the time for tough love. Now is the time to say, hey, you know what? Because I love you, I'm going to tell you, time to pick yourself up, right? Time to do something about it, because you can, because you're better than what you think. Um, and and as you share those messages, the person's probably not going to appreciate it immediately. But what you've done is you've put those messages into the person's environment. And now this person's marinating in that. So at the very least, you're balancing out all those messages from news, yeah, and every day you now is 4,000, 5,000, 4,000, 5,000, ridiculous numbers. And
Yep.
you're hooked on it, right? Even though there's nothing you can do about it, but you're still hooked on it. I wonder what's the number today.
Yep.
Why? You know what? If you're not going to do anything about it, don't bother looking at it. Go read something else. Go speak to somebody else. Go find something else to uplift yourself. And I think that's important. So look at and now it's more critical than ever, because you've lost. Well, we've all lost the opportunity for incidental messages to come our way. Right now, Chinese New Year season. And you know what I really miss about this Chinese New Year season? I used to love going to shops and to strangers and whatever little interactions that we've had, and then say "Goi fa choi," and then everybody goes like, "Yeah, Goi fa choi, Goi fa choi," And I really miss that. That's a part of the childhood that I grew up. My mother always taught me, hey, it's Chinese New Year, just go wish that. It doesn't matter. And this is the time of the year where you can say, call if I try to somebody and somebody's going to answer you and they're going to answer you
Correct.
with you know what? You too, buddy. And that's missing. So all those incidental messages that were positive is all missing. So
Yeah.
you've now got to consciously create it. You've now got to make an effort to connect with somebody, give those good vibes out, get those good vibes back in return. Don't hide away from that. Do it consciously.
Mhm. You brought up Chinese New Year, which is very interesting because now let's move this towards the older generation who are going to feel rather sad because most of us or most of anyone celebrating Chinese New Year can't go back home and celebrate the festivity with your loved ones back in your kampongs. So that's going to be tough for the elderly to be a little hopeful, isn't it? But we got to introduce the virtual world to them. But how do we liven up a festivity when there's so much going on?
What? How do I liven up the festivity? You know what? So here's what I've realized about being online. Being online is about as energetic as you're willing to make it to be.
Correct.
Like any other relationship, just like any other gathering. If everybody goes home and everybody keeps quiet and everybody's really depressed and everybody's like, finished, go and enjoy, so on and so forth, doesn't work either.
Please don't
It's,
do that, John.
it's just that the environment that we used to be in naturally lent itself to high energy. It naturally lent itself to optimism.
Correct.
The environment that we're currently in now, which naturally doesn't do that. So you know what? If it naturally doesn't do that, you just make extra effort to do that.
Yeah.
And not expect it to happen naturally. So the question now would be, if it's not going to happen naturally, then what are you going to do about it? And if you can say, I'm going to do this, I can guarantee you that you will have a much higher chance of optimism and energy compared to somebody who is saying what to do.
Mm.
You get what I mean? So it's about a conscious effort right now. These days, when you're online, as far as relationships are concerned, as far as hope is concerned, it's all about conscious effort versus expecting something else to happen, versus expecting somebody else to do it for you, versus expecting it to happen naturally. No.
I think throughout this whole conversation, I think that's the main underlying message that I got from you, because we have to make a conscious effort in everything, whether it's discipline or preparing to fail and picking ourselves up. It is definitely a conscious effort, because if we continue to wallow in self-pity, it's never gonna happen, isn't it? So we have to make that conscious effort to do anything.
I was listening into a radio broadcast the other day, and then there was this young lady, I think in school, and they were talking about how tough it was for SPM and STPM and basically students in general, right?
Yeah.
And this young lady, and I really admired her because she was, we need to do this, and the government needs to do this, and we need to be able to support our student population. There's a lot of us going into depression and so on and so forth. So it was really she stepped forward to say that. But one thing that I did pick up on, which I wasn't quite a fan of, was the tendency to say, so it's not fair, at this time, we should be looking at our prom. So it's not fair that this was dropped from us. At this time, we should be enjoying school and extracurricular activities, and it's not fair that this is taken away. And you know what? Yeah, it's not fair. I know it's not fair. It's not fair that the 3-year-old can't go out to run anymore. It's not fair that the pilots have to go and cook burgers at the roadside.
Correct.
It's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair. We know. And as long as you keep telling yourself that it's not fair, you're not going to do anything about it. So stop it. Everybody knows it's not fair. You ask the billionaire, he's going to tell you it's not fair. You ask the person on the street, he's going to tell you it's not fair. In everybody's eyes, life is never fair.
Absolutely.
So don't keep telling yourself that life's not fair. We know already. The question is, what are you going to do about it? So if this is the norm, and I keep emphasizing that this is the norm, then move on, adopt a mentality of, okay, how are we going to make the best of it? And then if things change in the future, then good for you lah. But
Mm.
all the senior leaders that I know, they're one trait that people don't expect from them is pessimism. A lot of the senior people that I work with, they're pretty pessimistic people. They're like, vaccine, oh, so fast lah, 2021 lah, no lah, 2023 lah, and so on and so forth. Quite depressing sitting around with these guys. Oh, what happened lah, and so on and so forth, right? But then what I also realized was that in the midst of all of their pessimism, there was an iron will, there was an iron determination that says, no lah, don't expect the vaccine to come lah. So we must do this, we must do this, we must do this, we must do this. Economy is not going to improve until 2023 lah. So do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. Whereas the rest of us just go to the first part. And then we don't do the second part of, so let's do this.
Yeah.
So it's about empowerment. It's about empowerment. And not the traditional form of empowerment of somebody empowering you. It's about you empowering
Yourself.
empowering yourself to act.
Yeah.
Focusing on the things that that you can do.
Yeah.
Recognizing that it's going to be a bad situation and it's probably not going to get worse, but recognizing that you will be okay because you are going to take the steps to make it okay.
I like that though. You are pessimist, yet you have like a plan B. This is what we're gonna do. The situation's not good, but we'll do this. To try and make it better. Yeah,
Yes.
that's brilliant.
So be pessimistic. Be pessimistic. It's okay, but you got to have a plan that allows you to say, it's going to be terrible, but I'm going to be okay because I'm going to do this, and that doesn't work. Then I'm going to do this, and this. Instead of just telling yourself, it's not going to, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad.
Yeah. Correct. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to what you said just now when you spoke to a friend and he said, adopt, not adapt. What is the difference? I mean, all this while we have known that, human beings, we're resilient, we will bounce back, we adapt to any situation that we're put in. So what is this adopting that we're talking about now?
So if I were to put it into a nutshell, and I went through the same question that you're asking me right now, adopt versus adapt sounds really cool, but what does it really mean? And
it's not like adopting a dog or something, you know what I mean?
And that's exactly what it is, right? No, not the adopting a dog. But you can't adapt a dog.
Yeah, correct.
You're going to take the dog, and with the taking of the dog, change the whole environment that's surrounding you and surrounding the dog. You can't adapt the dog. So what is the dog? The dog here is the mindset, right? The mentality. I said it's really important for you to adopt the mentality that this is it, that this is the norm, this is how it's going to be, and it's probably not going to change. Adopt that. Now, once you've adopted that, you can then adapt your behavior and your skill sets and your normal everyday things that you do to deal with that situation. But if you haven't adopted that mindset, but you're trying to adapt, you're going to be waiting for the situation to go back to the norm. No, this is the, right? And when the situation doesn't go back, that's when you have to deal with hopelessness, feelings of depression, frustration, and anger, and so on and so forth. Because I am unconsciously waiting for it to go back. And that was what we spoke about earlier, right? In November, December, we're like, right off 2020, 2021 is going to be better. We adapted the behavior during 2020. We didn't adopt the mentality that, hey, you know what? From now onwards, this is how it's going to be. For the foreseeable future and so on and so forth, this is how it's going to be. So look at your kids' education, look at your personal growth, look at your career, look at your finances and say, if this is how it's going to be for the next 20, 30 years, then what's going to happen? What's going
Yeah.
to change? Instead of saying, I'm going to try to withstand this and adapt right now so that I can survive this. And a lot of people say, I'm going to rely on my savings, because I think this is going to last for about 8 to 12 months. And then I'm just going to lay low for a little while, cut costs as much as possible. And then hopefully when the situation swings back, I will be okay. No lah,
Yep.
you die standing, right?
You
But in
couldn't be more
the
blunt, John.
you know what? This is the reality. Um,
Absolutely.
and if you're, let's say if you're out of a job, what if you ask yourself, what if I'm out of a job for the next 10 years? What if I never get a job? What are you gonna do? That's
I
the
would die.
You're not gonna sit down and cry, right? You're gonna do stuff. You're gonna do things about it. So sometimes adopting that mentality is important. That no, this is how it is. If that's how it is, then what am I going to do about it?
Mhm.
Versus the other way around, it says I'm going to do this because this is not how it is. This is temporary. So I'm going to
Yeah.
do this, and then we find out that this is not temporary. This is permanent.
So, would you say that adopting the change is like embracing the change, basically? You've adapted, but you also know that this is your new lifestyle. So, if I adopt a dog, right? So, I would have to accept the fact that, hey, I've got to walk the dog twice a day.
Yeah,
I've got to clean after the dog. I got to know that my house is going to be filled with fur. So, that's adopting a dog. Oh,
brilliant,
brilliant.
brilliant. I have a kid now. I've got two kids. You know that, right? I've got two kids, and now not now when I embraced fatherhood. I had to adopt that mentality that life was no longer going to be the same. That life in fact would be turned topsy turvy.
Absolutely.
And for those of you who are parents out there, you know that is true, right? The people who and therefore I thoroughly enjoy parenthood. I thoroughly enjoy fatherhood. Of course, there are frustrating moments. Everybody goes through that, but everybody by and large enjoys that. Well, I by and large enjoy that. But if I had gone into fatherhood trying to adapt my lifestyle to cater to these two monkeys that are running around right now, instead of
It's going to be disastrous.
I'm going to be constantly wishing that it was the way it was before.
Correct.
And then instead of me looking at the opportunities to grow and the opportunities to build stronger relationships and have a richer life, I'm going to be just looking at the past and saying, oh, I missed that part of it. I could do this in the past and I could do that in the past and so on and so forth. And that's not really a recipe for growth.
That's a recipe for disaster.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a question on our comment board. Judy says, a lot of people said be aware, have awareness, as one can't adopt or adapt without being aware. So how best can one be aware? And how does one know if one is not delusional or shock sendiri? Many have big egos and confidence and thought that they have awareness, but in reality, they don't. So what's your thoughts on that, John? That's many questions there. So where do you begin?
Woo! How best can one be aware? How does one know if one is not delusional or shock sendiri? So for those of you who have a tendency where everybody is saying, "Wow, you're so good, you're so good, you're so good," that's also the messages that you're marinating, right?
Correct.
And I said earlier on that if you're the more pessimistic type, those are the kind of messages that you want more of. But if you already have a lot of those messages, so you keep going to Mac, or Mac keeps coming to me and say, "John, you're wonderful. You're gonna be all right. And so on and so forth." That's good for John, but John also now needs to go and say, "Hey, my marinade a bit too sweet, and too sweet also.
It's salt, is it?
Go a bit more salt. And go and find other people who will say, "No, John, it's going to be a really tough time, and if you don't do this, you're gonna be in trouble, and you're gonna be, not being able to grow, or you're gonna go bankrupt, or financially you're gonna be, disastrous, and so on and so forth." So I wanna, for self-awareness, two things. One is internal. Do a lot of reflection. Do a lot of thinking, and now's the best time than ever to think, because what else are you gonna do? So it's and I know some of you are thinking like, "Wow, you wow now work from home." Yeah, I know, yeah, I know. I've been through that. It's a really strange time because now we're crazy busy than ever, but at the same time, it's like not busy but super busy, busy but not super. I don't know how to put it, but that's the emotion, right? We're staying at home. I can't do stuff. It's just work, 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 work. So from that sense, really, really busy. But I can't do anything else. So in that sense, I've got time. So if you've got time, go reflect. Ask yourself, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and force yourself to list it down. There are tons of resources on the internet. If you just Google tools for self-reflection, just Google one of them. And if you don't know where to start, just pick one and just start on one. The other thing is, so this is internal reflection. Reflection is really, really important because if you're not spending time thinking, reflecting, it's kind of difficult to grow. Like Judy says, your self-awareness is pretty low. But in order for you to have good self-awareness, good reflection, you need ingredients. Where do those ingredients come from? I said you can Google online from a learning perspective. There are tools like psychometric tools. There are 360 tools and so on and so forth from a learning perspective, right? In a corporate organization. From a personal basis, you can also go ask your friends and ask your friends, tell me, what's the one thing about me that could lead to failure during this time? What do you think is the worst trait that I have right now that if I don't fix, I'm going to get into trouble in the next 6 months? And going out to get these external data points is really important. And hopefully you've got friends that are close enough that will tell you, that's not gonna work, John.
Yeah.
So get a balance of messages. So if you're surrounded by negative messages, just so reflect, what messages are you surrounding yourself with? What messages are you currently surrounded by? And if you're surrounded by negativity, then you want to balance that out by saying, I got to get some positivity in my life. Where do I get it? Who's going to give me those messages? How am I going to get those messages? Same thing applies. If I'm getting everything in my life is all positive, hey, you know what? That's probably not realistic either.
Yeah.
So what do you have to be aware of so that you are prepared?
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's like a reality check in a way, isn't it?
And you know what? Reality checks are painful. Nobody likes them, but it's less painful if you decide to give yourself a reality check.
Correct.
Rather than the universe saying, John, time for a reality check. And then it becomes a lot more painful.
Absolutely.
If you build in reality checks regularly, then it tends to be less painful, or you tend to be more able and willing to take the pain.
Yeah. Yep. All right. She also has another question, which goes, fail fast. How do we fail fast, and how do we know we have failed and to pick up again?
Okay, so from a personal, so if you're struggling with career choices, or you're struggling with things that you need to do in order to generate income, or if you're struggling with a business that needs to transform, figure out new ways of doing business, failing fast is about having what we call an MVP. And an MVP here is minimum viable product, and it's a terminology that people use in the IT industry, right? You got a minimum viable product, you put it out to market, beta versions and so on, and then people sort of test it out and they fool around with it. And because they test it out and fool around with it, it crashes, and server's not strong enough, viruses come, and whatever. And those learning points helps you then improve the product. So same rules apply. Except that the product now may or may not be an IT product. It could be your business, it could be yourself, it could be your resume, it could be anything. But instead of waiting for perfection to happen, we're saying get to a stage where it's a minimum viable product, where people are not going to take a look at it and say, that's people are going to take a look at it and say, oh, yeah, it's another baker. Okay, fine. Yeah, it's another one of those things. Okay, fine. That's an MVP. You're not going to get a huge hit negatively backwards. right? But you're gonna get either maybe some people liking it, some most having no opinions about it, some people really hating it, and so on and so forth. That's fine. And the question now is, you go out and then say, now that I've got the MVP, and I'm getting this kind of reaction or this kind of results, what is it that's about this product or about this project that I'm working on that's getting this kind of results, and what can I then do about it? And the analogy that I always use is, the only way to learn how to play basketball is by bringing the ball to court. So
Yep.
your MVP in this sense would be learn the rules, learn about the different moves, watch video about how you do it, and then you dribble at home. And once you know how to dribble and maybe you catch the ball a little bit, you're an MVP. Go to the court, because that's where you're gonna learn. That's where you're gonna learn how to excel. But you're not gonna go and disturb somebody else's game because you've got the basics already. You're an MVP. And people are going to say, yeah, okay, let him play lah. Versus, I hope he doesn't come because he's not done his homework. Failing fast is about doing your homework enough to an extent that you say, I can go to market now.
Yeah.
I can learn more by going to market.
All right. That's very interesting. Okay, so coming back to the topic of being hopeful, all right, because I think we've only got about 10 minutes left. Now, okay, I know you've mentioned it's time for tough love, but if there are people around us who are feeling hopeless and dejected and demotivated, how do we as friends or family members help them, or rather help pick themselves up?
I
Can we do
think,
that?
yeah, understand that as you look for people to,
We're not looking like they're just around us.
no,
We can't go like, okay, are you feeling hopeless today? Are you feeling hopeless today? Let me help you.
that would be really weird, but it's not as weird as you would think. And actually, I wish more people would probably do that. You need anything today? Check in on somebody. There's really no harm checking in and just sending a text that says, "You doing all right? How are you?" and so on and so forth. Really no harm. What's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen is, why are you texting me like that? Are you okay? You feel John, feel what? Why are you asking me, am I okay? That's the worst that can happen. You know what? I can deal with that. But if the person really does need a pick me up, you're there. So I spoke about tough love, and from a leadership perspective, again, I emphasize there's a difference between feeling depressed and depression.
Yeah.
And if you know that this person is feeling depressed and wallowing in self-pity, it may be time to tell the person that you are wallowing in self-pity. Stop it. But at the same time, tell the person that, you know what, I admire you, I like you, I love you, I think you're wonderful, but you're in a funk right now, and you're marinating yourself in messages of self-pity, and that's no good. Because while I want people to inject messages into my environment, I can also remove myself from the environment, right?
Correct.
So if I'm surrounding myself with self-pity, I can remove myself from the environment that helps me or forces me to think in a self-pitying manner. So I would still go back to tough love. Not one or the other. Don't just be tough. Also show love. You can't just show love, because then the person becomes very needy. You can't just show tough, because then the person, it's all negative messages. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Something wrong with you. And it just pushes that spiral further down. So I think tough love for me is a good reminder for myself. It's also a good reminder for the people around me. And that's what we've been doing. Tough, but suck it up. And that's the one. So we've got a saying in my office wall, which we've not seen for the last 12 months. It says, show up, suck it up, and shut up.
Woo!
So showing up is about discipline, right? Even though you
Yes.
don't feel like showing up, you still show your face, you still do the things that you're supposed to be doing. Sucking up is about accepting that the environment is like that. This is the reality, this is how it's going to be.
Correct.
Shutting up means stop whining. Nobody needs to hear you whine. There's already enough bad news around in the world, and everybody knows you're in a tough space. I know I'm in. Everybody knows we're in a tough space. So let's all do each other a favor and stop complaining and whining and whinging. Right? And that's for me the first couple of steps in moving forward in dealing with
Yeah.
this situation.
I think once you do those three, then the next would be you'll find a solution to actually pick yourself up. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You would you're giving yourself more room to
correct.
for the solutions to come find you as well.
Yeah.
You know, for people who are looking for good people to come and find you, nobody's gonna hire you if you're complaining about things online. And I was on LinkedIn this morning and I see some people who very obviously put up and say, you know what, I'm out of a job right now, so I'm searching for a job. Hey, anybody who can help me, that's going to be really cool. Please help me. And I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And the number of people that responded that said, hey, you know what, this person's looking, that company's hiring, I'm going to pass you this, connect you with this person, connect you with that person. So many people responded. But this was because this person showed up. I'm sure she didn't feel like telling the world that I've lost my job. I'm
Yeah.
sure this person didn't feel like, putting herself out there and saying, I got retrenched. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to say things like that and share that with the world. But she did. So she showed up. She sucked up the fact that I am now retrenched and I need a new job. He said, I need a
Correct.
new job pretty badly. She said, she accepted that reality. And
Mm.
she didn't go and whine about how unfair the world was. She just said, I've got this to offer you, and I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Anybody with any sort of job that will help me, add value to you, let me know. So I thought it was brilliant. Versus a lot of people who
I think that I love that though. You're actually taking action in looking for a job because you already know you need to do something about it. So yeah, that's an interesting way of doing things. Very
and
nice.
well, looking for a job is just one of the many examples that people are struggling with right now, right? So health, you can't go to the gym, relationships are suffering. There's so many things that you can't do. Don't look at the things that you can't do. Look at the things that you can do. Focus on the things that you can do, not the things that you can't do. The possibilities
Yeah.
rather than impossibilities. And
Yeah.
that's what empowering means.
Yeah. Very nice. I like that. All right. So as we end the topic today, I just want to go back to, the whole topic of being hopeful. Why do we need to be hopeful, John? Why do we need to continue being hopeful despite everything that's going on around us?
Um, I suppose earlier on I said where there is life, there is hope.
Yeah.
Uh, I think if you flip it around, it makes sense as well. Where there is hope, there is life. And and I think if you're not focused on the fact that and I'm a Christian, right? So you've got faith, hope, and love,
Mm.
and the greatest of it is love. But even then, hope is one of the big three. And and hope for me is one of those things that tells you that things can change and things can get better. That what the struggle that you're going through right now is just part of the journey that you're on. And from that perspective, I say, look, embrace that journey as much as you can and enjoy the journey as much as you can. I had a friend's son who came and said, Uncle John, how again college, and it's not fair, right? Because right now we should be enjoying life. And I say, you know what, I feel you because I thoroughly enjoyed my uni days, and you can't do that. But what he can and will be able to do is to look back and say, this was an event that's probably uh, changed the world, and I lived through that, and I um, thrived through that. And that's going to be a pivotal point for the young folk these days, looking back on the year 2020, maybe 2021, and said that this was the period that shifted everything. So always a silver lining, I hope. And if there's one thing I'd like to say in closing is be kind.
Yeah.
Be kind. There are so many things going on right now. It's such a crazy world. You can't properties are bad investments, but GameStop, where losing money is a great investment. How crazy is that, right? So in this day and age where everybody's going through such a crazy period, if you can be kind, be kind. We need a lot more than kindness in the world, and everybody's going through their own troubles,
Struggles.
their own struggle. No matter how nice it looks from your side of the fence, everybody's going through their own life, and life generally isn't easy. So be kind.
Very nice. I think, when I started this year, I told myself that's what we're going to do. We're going to be kinder. And I think we're going to make sure that we spread the word around about being kinder as well. Because as much as people have turned online, you notice that people get very unkind when they're online as well. So yeah, let's be kinder, regardless of whether you're in person or you're online. If you don't have anything kind to say, don't say it. Let's go back old school.
And you know what? Post more kind things online, can
Yeah.
the things online, can it's like everybody's got this pent up anger. They can't get me. I'm gonna don't do that. So because you're adding to somebody's environment.
Yeah.
What do you want to add to that environment, right? Just be conscious that as people are adding stuff to your environment, you're also adding stuff to other people's environment. I think that's important to remember.
That's very true. All right. So we've come to the end of the show already, John. As always, you give us really, really good advice. And, these are things that we will take with us and face the rest of the 11 months ahead. So I hope it's not going to be as fast or as dreadful to some, as 2020, but it's going to be rather hopeful. What's your personal advice for everyone tuning in this afternoon?
So you know what, and this is the same advice I gave to people last year. I said there is a great opportunity in this situation, and you've only got to look for those opportunities. And this is the kind of opportunity that comes once in a lifetime or once in 2 lifetimes. So as you feel that it's a crisis, also recognize that because it's a crisis, there is an opportunity.
Yeah.
How are you going to take advantage of that opportunity? So this is, I said, adopting of this mindset. That's going to be really important because then it opens your mind towards seeing these opportunities. Whereas if trying to adapt to what it was before, you're just hunkering down and hoping that it will pass. So there are opportunities out there. Go grab those opportunities.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, John. Thank you so much for all the really good advice. And for those of you watching and who have stayed with us from the start to the end, thank you so much for, participating in all the comments at the site as well. It's brilliant, So I'm going to wish you a happy Chinese New Year. John is just a week away. Have a good one. Kong si pachai.
And go spread all the people out there, right? Because I don't get to go and do this to the shopkeepers and to the people on the street. I'm going to do it to you. Gong hei fa choi!
Gong hei fa choi to you too. Have a good one. And here's hoping that everything will be more hopeful and more positive in the year 2021. Once again, John, thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.